This is David Lincoln coming to you again from the Robbins house for our third talk on Reconstruction, its legacy, and how it connects to Ellen Garrison, who grew up here in Concord at the Robbins house and became an activist in Maryland and Northern Virginia during Reconstruction. Now, in 1876, after the corrupt compromise between the Republicans and the Democrats, after the contested presidential election that year, the last federal soldiers were pulled out of the southern states, the former Confederate states, essentially leaving the newly freed African Americans of the South to fend for themselves. They had made great gains thanks to Reconstruction. Okay, you had African American senators representing southern states in Washington. You had African American congressmen representing southern districts in the United States House of Representatives. African Americans participated actively in the drawing up of new constitutions for many of the former Confederate states in the 1860s. But what we will see once the federal troops leave, and they had been consistently being reduced in number, okay, up to 1876, but after 1876, they're gone. Okay, any occupation of the South is now over. Okay, what this means is, okay, you will see, okay, the white enemies of African American progress consistently now, over the next couple of decades, chipping away at the gains that African Americans had made in the wake of emancipation, in the wake of the Civil War. Okay, by the early 20th century, Jim Crow laws would be firmly entrenched. The Supreme Court would have delegitimized most of the federal civil rights legislation that was passed by the Republican Congresses in the 1860s and 1870s. And by the early 20th century, the last representatives, African American representatives to the U.S. House, would leave office. So, segregation, slavery by another name, as it's been called. The Southerners took racial injustice right up to the hilt of reestablishing slavery. They couldn't quite go there, but they made it next to impossible for African American people to vote, to hold office, to get equal rights in the South. Now, how can a country that prides itself on freedom, on liberty, on democracy, justify such a system? One of the ways is to attack Reconstruction, attack the policies that had sought to make African American people in this country, and especially in the South, equal. You would see historians, both academic and popular. You would see various aspects of popular culture, including films, portraying African American people in the South as unprepared, uneducated, lazy, dangerous, lascivious, unable to deal with having political power, unable to deal with having social equality. You would see white allies of African Americans portrayed as corrupt, Okay, the idea of the carpetbagger, a greedy northern businessman coming south in the wake of the American Civil War to exploit the resources there at the expense of poor, unfortunate white Southerners. Okay, in the popular imagination, that's what Reconstruction became. Okay, corrupt, okay, deceitful, greedy white Northerners trying to uplift, okay, dangerous, subhuman African Americans who were not ready, okay, to have political power and equality. Okay, the Dunning School, named after Archibald Dunning, a professor, okay, of academic historians, portrayed many of the acts that passed during Reconstruction as unconstitutional. They didn't necessarily support secession in the South during the Civil War, but Reconstruction was portrayed as unconstitutional, dictatorial, unnecessary. The presence of federal troops, okay, portrayed as a negative thing. Okay. This was, okay, the common theme in academia in this country when it came to teaching Reconstruction well into the 1960s. It was not until the 1960s, okay, that one saw academic historians pushing back and getting an audience, okay, against this idea, okay, of Reconstruction being a corrupt thing. Prior to the 1960s, people who did valiantly try to push back. The best example was W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the co-founders of the NAACP, who wrote a magisterial history of Reconstruction in 1935, trying to refute the Dunning School, but his back then was a lonely voice. Okay. A lonely voice. He had trouble getting reviewed by serious academic journals. Okay. He was criticized by Time magazine, the New York Times, for having an axe to grind. Yes, he had an axe to grind about the way that his fellow African Americans were being treated, by the way that Reconstruction was being portrayed. Okay. People following in his footsteps would not get a wide hearing until the 1960s, and that was finally when you saw the academic narrative beginning to change. And today we can draw on all kinds of great academic historians like Eric Foner, who wrote in the late 1980s, Douglas Edgerton, who wrote a few years ago, Henry Louis Gates, who's done documentaries for PBS and written books about Reconstruction. Thankfully, the academic narrative is beginning to change today. Beyond academia, there was also popular culture. Okay, popular novels, films. The 1915 film, Birth of a Nation, based on a novel called The Klansman, okay, was a huge hit. Okay, very controversial. Okay, banned in some parts of the country, but overall throughout this country, a massive hit. Praised by President Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat who had it screened at the White House. His handlers tried to walk back his praise of the film, but Wilson, according to the sources that we have, really liked the movie. Okay, claimed that it was an accurate portrayal. Okay, in that movie, the general portrayal of African Americans by white actors in blackface is as brutes, okay, dangerous, animalistic barbarians, okay, threatening, beleaguered white people. And the Ku Klux Klan, okay, the novel the film was based on was called The Klansmen, okay, were portrayed as valiant knights, okay, coming to save, okay, these threatened white men and women from barbaric African Americans. Okay. A couple decades later, in 1936, year after W.E.B. Du Bois published his History of Reconstruction to limited fanfare, Margaret Mitchell wrote the Pulitzer Prize-winning huge bestseller Gone with the Wind. Not as overtly racist as Birth of a Nation and the Dixon novels that it was based upon, but definitely portraying Southern people as victims, the Southern cause during the Civil War as valiant, and Reconstruction as a negative thing. okay, victimizing whites, empowering black people who were not ready for equality. A few years later, the movie came out, still considered one of the greatest movies in film history, consistently shown on networks, okay, throughout this country. Okay. Many people, despite the changing in the academic narrative in the 1960s in this country, would still have their overall image of Reconstruction crafted by Margaret Mitchell's novel and the film on which it was based. Okay. The myth of the carpetbagger in one very important scene is reinforced in that movie. Okay, carpetbaggers are referred to as a scourge that's worse than the Northern armies that supposedly victimized the South during the Civil War. Okay, so despite the fact that the academic narrative has largely changed, there is still the popular narrative of Reconstruction as a negative thing, okay, that needs to be fought against. And in this house, here in Concord, okay, obviously far away from the South, when we tell the story of Ellen Garrison, okay, we try to contribute to that pushback against the popular image of Reconstruction. Okay, if there's a person from the time period who stands as a refutation of the myth of the carpetbagger, it's Ellen Garrison. She was not a wealthy businessman going south to exploit people, to steal resources. Okay? She was a passionate activist who wanted to help people less fortunate than herself. She was not paid a lot of money by the American Missionary Association. We have letters in the house in which she is requesting vehemently to get money that she's been owed for months just so that she can feed herself. She risked her own physical safety protesting racist segregationist laws in Maryland. So one of the many missions that we have here at the Robbins House, and Ellen Garrison is our best vehicle for this, is to try and contribute to the pushback, okay, against this narrative, okay, of Reconstruction as a time of corruption, as a time of white Southerners being victims more so than Southern African Americans who were having their newly granted rights wrenched away from them, often violently. Okay. When we talk about Ellen here, we try to contribute in a small way, nationally, okay, to this more positive narrative of Reconstruction as a very progressive time in this nation's history, where Congress was passing laws designed to help not just African Americans, but all people in the South. There was no public education in the South, and the public education that people like Ellen Garrison tried to contribute to, was not designed just to help black people. It was designed to help white people too. Okay? So when we tell her story here, okay, her bravery, her integrity, her trials and tribulations, that's what we're trying to do. Okay, it's not our only mission here at the Robbins House, but it is a very important one. So if you come and visit us at the Robbins House, for now virtually, hopefully when things return to normal physically too, we can talk about some of this history with you, talk about Ellen with you, and how she fit into this broader context of Reconstruction, share some of the documents that we have about her in the house with you. For now, though, okay, I would highly recommend that you visit our website and check out some of our brochures about Ellen Garrison and about Reconstruction. So thank you for visiting virtually, folks. This has been David Lincoln for these last 3 installments on Reconstruction. Okay, please visit us to learn more about how our house, and in particular Ellen Garrison, who grew up here in Concord, fits into this broader narrative. Thank you so much.